Death is not an evil, but the lack of preparation, for it is. Seneca. Death is life's only certainty, yet it remains one of humanity's greatest taboos. From the dawn of civilization, we have built myths, rituals, and philosophies to decode it. In some cultures, such as Mexico's Day of the Dead, death is celebrated as part of existence. Others, however, do everything possible to avoid it, shrouding it in mystery and fear. But why do we fear something so inevitable? This fear is not new. Michel de Montaigne, a French philosopher from the 16th century, once asked why we run from something that is a part of us. He believed that fearing death disconnects us from life. Ironically, this fear often prevents us from living fully. Today, modern society seems to have taken this fear to another level. The obsession with youth and health creates the illusion that we can overcome mortality. Ignoring death has become almost instinctive. On social media, the pursuit of a perfect life dominates narratives, while the end of this journey is rarely discussed. Montaigne suggests doing the opposite, facing death head-on. Perhaps understanding it is the first step to living without the constant weight of fear. The more we fear death, the more we limit our choices. We avoid risks, delay important decisions, and miss simple moments. It is as if we are always walking on eggshells, trying to control the uncontrollable. Montaigne saw this habit as the true enemy, fear that robs us of freedom. He stated, "Meditation on death is meditation on freedom." For him, accepting death is like opening the door to a life without chains. But what really scares us? Perhaps it is not death itself, but what we imagine about it. The unknown is always frightening. It is like navigating dark waters without knowing what lies beneath the surface. But are we wasting too much energy trying to avoid the inevitable? Does this obsession with what comes next disconnect us from what truly matters, the present? Montaigne's idea of facing death directly is not just a philosophical challenge. It is an invitation to freedom. He believed that by understanding our mortality, we free ourselves to live more authentically. His reflections on the subject remain powerful because they come from someone who lived in a world where death was a constant companion. But who was Michel de Montaigne, and what led him to think this way? Michel de Montaigne was not a conventional philosopher. He did not confine himself to complex treatises or isolate himself in an ivory tower. On the contrary, he wrote as if talking to a friend, in a direct, sincere, and accessible manner. Born in 1533, during the French Renaissance, he lived in a time of uncertainty. Plagues, religious wars, and political conflicts were part of daily life. The fragility of life was always present. Curiously, Montaigne began his career as a lawyer and politician, working in an environment where power and glory were supreme ideals. But at the age of 38, he decided he had seen enough. He left it all behind and secluded himself in his library, transforming the chaos around him into fuel for reflection. His famous essays were born from this search for meaning amid the turmoil, as if he were telling the world, "I cannot change life's rules, but I can understand them better." Montaigne did not set out to teach anything. He simply wanted to share his experiences. He often said, "I do not teach, I relate." This humble, almost unassuming stance makes him extraordinarily human. He did not aim to be a master, but a companion on the journey. This approach is what keeps his ideas so relevant. His relationship with death was not merely theoretical. Montaigne witnessed death up close many times. He lost friends and family to the plagues and wars of his era. But it was the death of his best friend, Étienne de la Boétie, that profoundly marked him. The loss deeply affected Montaigne, but also led him to reflect on what truly matters in life, the connections we create, and the moments we share with those we love. Additionally, Montaigne faced his own mortality during a severe horseback riding accident. The impact left him unconscious for hours, and he described the experience as surprisingly peaceful. "It was like floating in a calm I had never felt before," he wrote. For Montaigne, that moment was a revelation. The fear of death is often more frightening than death itself. Facing life's fragility made Montaigne an acute observer of everyday existence. He found meaning in simple things, like a good wine or a fireside chat. He understood that life does not have to be grand to be significant. Perhaps it is this simplicity that makes his philosophy so powerful. He turned the extraordinary into something accessible. By choosing to step away from power and immerse himself in his library, Montaigne did not escape life. He confronted it head-on. He believed that to live well, one must first accept death as part of the process. His work is, above all, an invitation to freedom. For him, death was not a rupture but a natural transition that helps us appreciate every moment. Now that we understand who Montaigne was, we can delve deeper into his perspective on mortality. As we will see, his philosophy goes far beyond fear of death. It teaches us how to live with lightness and authenticity. Michel de Montaigne believed humanity's greatest mistake is treating death as something separate from life. For him, life and death are not opposites, but two sides of the same coin. To philosophize, he said, is to learn to die, not in a morbid way, but with the acceptance that everything in nature has a cycle. Just as day gives way to night, life yields to death. Resisting this idea is, in his words, fighting the inevitable. Why is this so hard to accept? Much of our fear of death stems from treating it as taboo. In trying to distance ourselves from it, we live as if life were infinite. We postpone decisions, avoid risks, and transform the future into a place where everything will be resolved, which rarely happens. As Montaigne noted, this type of thinking disconnects us from the only reality that matters, the present. If we look closely, death teaches us a valuable lesson. Everything with a beginning also has an end. This is what gives things value. Imagine life as a field of sunflowers. If they bloomed forever, would they still be as special? Mortality, as harsh as it seems, is what turns every moment into something precious. This perspective was not something Montaigne derived solely from books. He was deeply inspired by Stoics and Epicureans. Epicurus, for example, said death is nothing to us because when it arrives, we are no longer there to experience it. It is like the lights going out in a theater after the final scene. The show is over, but no one is left to mourn the darkness. Stoics, such as Marcus Aurelius, argued that fearing death is a waste of energy on something we cannot control. They invited us to focus on the present, live with integrity, and let the inevitable take its course. Montaigne agreed but humanized these ideas. He acknowledged that fear is natural and that no one feels completely at ease with the unknown. But he also saw accepting death as a form of freedom. When we stop fearing the inevitable, we can view life with greater ease. A simple moment, like the warmth of the sun on a cold day or a friend's laughter, ceases to be trivial and becomes extraordinary. Think about it. Is the problem really death itself or the meaning we project onto it? Facing death is like accepting the sunset, not as an ending, but as part of the cycle that makes the day complete. What if, instead of living to avoid it, we began integrating it into our daily lives? For Montaigne, this integration was not resignation, but a constant reminder of life's fragility and beauty. He believed death, far from being an enemy, was a quiet teacher that helps us value the present. After all, those who learn to die also learn to live. Michel de Montaigne believed the quality of our lives is directly tied to how we perceive death. For him, living well was not about achieving grandiose accomplishments, but about finding authenticity and simplicity in daily life. The more we accept our mortality, the more freedom we gain to enjoy the present. And here lies the paradox. Fear of death does not protect us. On the contrary, it traps us. We begin avoiding risks, delaying important decisions, and ignoring the present, like someone obsessively rearranging a boat while the river continues flowing. Montaigne reminds us that we cannot control the river's course, but we can make the most of the journey. He rejected the idea of perfection. He knew life would not always be glorious or filled with exceptional moments. In fact, he believed happiness lies in the small details we often overlook. A good conversation, the scent of fresh bread in the morning, or the glow of a star on a quiet night. These are the moments that make life worth living. But what does it mean to truly live? In our pursuit of an ideal existence, marked by status, success, and longevity, we often lose our way. We live in the future, trying to shield ourselves from the discomfort of mortality and forget the present, which is all we really have. For Montaigne, accepting that life has an end is what gives meaning to every choice we make. Think of life as a book. You do not know how many pages are left, but that does not matter. What matters is what you write on each page. Is it worth spending entire chapters worrying about problems you cannot solve? Montaigne believed a well-lived life is like a book with authentic chapters, full of moments that, though simple, make the story worthwhile. He also saw the quality of our relationships as one of the cornerstones of a meaningful life. For him, friendship and human connection not only give life purpose, but also help us face its fragility. In shared laughter, intimate conversations, and acts of kindness, we find what truly matters. Montaigne reminds us that living well does not mean avoiding suffering or denying mortality, but learning to be present, to love wholeheartedly, and to appreciate the beauty around us. After all, death may take many things from us, but it can never erase the richness of a life well lived. And perhaps this is Montaigne's greatest legacy. Living well is not about prolonging our days, but about giving purpose to each moment. Accepting death frees us to live, not as those who fear the end, but as those who embrace each moment with the intensity of knowing it is unique. Michel de Montaigne invites us to view death from a new perspective. Rather than seeing it as the tragic end of existence, he presents it as a constant companion. Far from robbing us of joy, death teaches us to live fully. For Montaigne, death is not an enemy but the final act of a well-lived life, the period at the end of a story written with intention and courage. We live in a world that idolizes youth and control. We seek to extend life at any cost, while neglecting what truly makes it meaningful. Montaigne challenges us. If we are so afraid of the end, how can we enjoy the journey? His wisdom lies in reminding us that fear of the inevitable is not protection, but a prison. For Montaigne, our relationship with death reflects how we live. He said that to philosophize is to learn to die, but this lesson goes beyond accepting mortality. It means living so authentically that death ceases to be something to fear. After all, the real tragedy is not the end of life, but a life unlived. Imagine life as a candle burning brightly. You do not know how long the flame will last, but you can choose to let it illuminate as much as possible while it does. Each moment becomes precious when we recognize it is not eternal. In this recognition lies freedom, the freedom to live with purpose, courage, and gratitude. Montaigne also reflected on the impact we leave behind. It is not about monumental achievements, but the simple, human moments we share. A smile, a kind word, a true friendship. These are the legacies that survive our absence. Death does not erase a well-lived life. It consecrates it. Just as a painting is complete only when the artist lays down the brush, our lives find meaning in their closure. Perhaps the greatest gift of Montaigne's philosophy is his ability to transform fear into wisdom. He teaches us that the unknown need not be terrifying. Like an explorer facing an unfinished map, we can approach death with curiosity and courage, knowing it is part of a larger cycle. Think about this. The day you were born was also the first step toward the end. Each birthday brings us closer to that moment, but does that diminish life's value? On the contrary, it is precisely this limitation that makes each instant so valuable. Just as a masterpiece is defined by its boundaries, our mortality turns time into something precious. At the end of his life, Montaigne left us an invaluable gift, the lesson that death, far from being feared, should be embraced as part of life's cycle. He wrote, "If you know how to live well, your death will be even sweeter." This is not just a beautiful phrase, but an invitation to transformation. True freedom is not avoiding death, but accepting its inevitability. And in accepting it, we are liberated to live with intention, authenticity, and joy. Montaigne challenges us to make our lives a work of art worth remembering, not because it is long, but because it is lived fully. Death is not the end. It is the closing of a cycle, the final note of a symphony. It is up to us to decide what music to play while we are here. And remember, knowledge is the path to true freedom. Count on me and follow the White Rabbit.